Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Wade Watches. I'm Wade, and today I'm going to be reviewing Oppenheimer, written and directed by Christopher Nolan, and starring Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Florence Pugh, Robert Downey Jr., and Matt Damon. So, um, as you can tell, I had to marinate on this one for a bit after seeing it in theaters for the first time a few days ago. It's another as, as Christopher, it's a Christopher Nolan hallmark at this point to have pretty much have you have to it's required that you watch his movies more than once to make sure that you pick up absolutely everything. You cannot watch a Christopher Nolan. You cannot simply watch a Christopher Nolan movie once and pick up on absolutely everything. He's like the king of making movies that you can like rewatch over and over and over again and pretty much pick up on new things during each subsequent watch. And that's not a bad thing. I like how he refuses to dumb anything down, hold anybody's hands. He and by doing that, by not over simplifying anything, he pretty much forces you to think deeply while watching his movies. It's not just kind of a casual viewing experience with him. It never is. You have to really think about what you're watching, and this is no exemption to that hallmark of Christopher Nolan's. Oppenheimer is definitely another deep thinking movie, and I know already that I'm gonna have to go out and see it again before it leaves theaters. I wonder if I'll be able to, just on get into the technical thing. As I said in my out of theater reaction, I saw it in Dolby Cinema, and all the IMAX. I want to see it in IMAX when I go and see it a second time, but they're still all sold out. But I don't think I mind seeing it in Dolby Cinema again because it was badass in Dolby. And I agree actually with a comment that somebody made on that video, which is, this isn't like, Tenet or Interstellar or Inception or even Dunkirk, where there's like a lot of action, a lot of like massive big special effects, because the majority of this movie is dialogue driven, character driven, where it's two people talking in a room just having conversations. So I personally feel like I won't feel like too robbed or deprived if I don't see this in IMAX. So all of that aside, let's get into talking about the movie as a movie. So I enjoyed this. I love this. Oppenheimer is, definitely one of my favorites of the year. Um but I guess, let's get the negatives out of the way before we get into like all the endless praise that I have to give this movie. Only negative that I have is pretty much ties into what I said earlier about just Christopher Nolan's movies in general, is that I know I didn't like catch absolutely all of the details and absolutely everything that was said in all of the conversation and dialogue sequences, which is like I'd say like 85% of this movie is dialogue driven. But that's absolutely not negative. It doesn't withdraw from everything. It just means that I am going to have to watch this a couple of more times, and I'm thrilled to do that. Everything else, flawless, perfect. Christopher Nolan knocks it out of the park, and he proves something that I've personally known for a long time, which is that Christopher Nolan, in my opinion, like his best movies are like his more grounded movies. Memento, the Dark Knight trilogy, though, that's Batman, but it's still more grounded than something like Interstellar, Tenet, or Inception. But anyway, Memento, Dark Knight trilogy, Dunkirk. I haven't seen Insomnia, but I've heard good things. But six movie, no, wait, five, five movies, because Dark Knight trilogy's three movies. Those five in particular are my absolute favorite Christopher Nolan movies, and this just made that list. And don't get me wrong, I don't dislike Tenet. or Inception or Interstellar. I'm a big fan of Inception in particular, but Interstellar and Tenet, they're okay. They're good, not great in my opinion. That's just my opinion. I know some people right now who are watching this video be like, how dare you? Those are it's flawless cinema. Those movies definitely have those movies definitely have their dedicated fan bases who will defend them with their last dying breath. Interstellar in particular, I've noticed, but they're just good, not great for me. Just my opinion. All right, don't hate me, but I've always preferred movies like Dunkirk to Interstellar and Tenet when it comes to Christopher Nolan's style of filmmaking. And this Oppenheimer is definitely in that same league. He once again demonstrates that he is just as good as creating historical dramas based on events that really happened, like Dunkirk, just as much as he is with creating like a fantastical space epic like Interstellar. And why this movie works predominantly because it is presented like a mythological tragedy, and kind of the I'm not going to get into details or anything like that. You guys know I like to keep it vague, but the first shot of this movie pretty much sets that up, that this is going to play like a Greek tragedy or a biblical tragedy, or just like something from mythology, like a tragedy from mythology. And I loved the hell out of that. I was not at all disappointed by the fact that the Trinity test, the thing that they're showing in all the trailers, building the bomb and testing the bomb out, that is more or less a chapter in this movie. I won't call it a cliff note, because a lot of like those dialogue sequences compose like 85%, comprise of 85% of this movie, do revolve around that particular historical event. But that is not the whole movie. The majority of this movie is characters talking. Won't call them courtroom sequences, like I guess like proceedings, like hearings, interrogations. They're more or less interrogations in my opinion, because like the characters in those sequences say, oh, this isn't a courtroom, you don't have to do X, Y, and Z. But I'm gonna call it like a courtroom drama. Like, so there's a lot of courtroom drama in this, and it all works because all of the performances around the board are solid. So I was not at all bored by the fact that there's a lot of talking in this movie, that it's a lot of dialogue, because everybody, absolutely everybody, knocks it out of the park. Cillian Murphy kills it as the titular J. Robert Oppenheimer. I like how he always tries to appear like emotionally undisturbed by things that are happening. Like he always tries to appear stoic and in control, but you can see, like, you can just tell and feel, and they demonstrate it sometimes as well, that he's just like breaking on the inside. And he just knocks it out of the park with that. At first I was like, is he just gonna be like really stolid and reserved? But they make it work. He manages to make it work. So kudos to Cillian Murphy. One of the best performances I've seen in the year. Emily Blunt, Florence Pugh also are all great. Matt Damon is great. But the other character besides Cillian Murphy, who kills it in this movie, who pretty much steals this movie from Cillian Murphy in the scenes that he's in it, is definitely Robert Downey Jr. Holy shit, man. It's one of those like performances, kind of like, it's kind of how I feel about Joe Pesci in Goodfellas, where while this is technically Ray Liotta's movie, Henry Hill is the main character in this movie. He's the one narrating. You're seeing the events unfold from his point of view. Every time Joe Pesci is on screen in that movie, it becomes his movie and his story. And Robert Downey Jr. does the same thing in Oppenheimer. When he's on screen, it's no longer Oppenheimer's movie. It's Robert Downey Jr.'s character, who's named Strauss. It's his movie. And dude, God, knocks it out of the park. So, nomination for supporting actor, maybe. I don't give a shit about the Oscars or the award shows, but it's possible. So yeah, solid performances across the board from everybody. That's what has to be. That's what has to happen to make a dialogue-driven movie like this work. You know, a character-driven movie like this work. And thankfully, everybody knocks it out of the park and does a great job. And another thing that I really enjoyed is that as this movie goes along, it becomes more tragic, and in some ways or another, it becomes more horrific. It's almost like a horror movie in some parts, and as it went on, the more it went on, the more emotionally drained and broken I felt, and I was not expecting this movie to do that to me because I thought it would mostly revolve around the Trinity test. And don't get me wrong, when the Trinity test happens, man, what a sequence, you know, what a sequence, and the sound, man, the sound in the testing the bomb sequence, like orgasmic, man, like a spiritual experience. It's like it was like simultaneously like some sort of like orgasmic experience, but also it's fucking terrifying, man. It almost gave me a heart attack, but an enjoyable heart attack. I don't Go out and see it in the theaters for yourself. I nothing I can say can justify how it feels to see that sequence in a movie theater. Nothing I say, but it's like a once in a lifetime experience. All the hype about Christopher Nolan creating the bomb himself, doing that himself, no CG effects. It was all real. It was all practical, and it definitely paid off because that sequence, chef's kiss. But that's not what the bulk of this movie is about. I kept saying, as I keep saying, excuse me, the majority of this movie is about like what creating something like that does to a person and what the consequences of creating a weapon of that magnitude would do to somebody. And since that's the movie's intention, and since that's the main agenda, main point of this movie, that's the main thing it wants to get across, it executes it perfectly. Um, and the last few minutes of this movie in particular, man, um, broke me. Like, seriously, like, broke me emotionally. And the last line, there's one last line in this movie before it cuts off to credits. When that line is delivered, I was just like, fuck, wow. And for a movie to like do that to me emotionally, like to break me that much, to just be this big of a tragedy, I can give it, wrapping it up, I can give it nothing short of another perfect 10 out of 10. A lot of good movies this year, and this Oppenheimer is another one of them. It's one of my favorites of the year. It's epic, it's awesome. Whole cast, it's rounded out by an A-list cast, and everyone does a phenomenal job of conveying like just how what this does to somebody. Just how this is simultaneous. It's equal parts. Just how I described that bomb sequence. This invention is equal parts awe-inspiring and awesome, but also it's something that's terrifying. And I think that this movie perfectly captures both sides of that. And yeah, so it's another perfect 10 out of 10. But unlike the other movies that I gave a perfect 10 out of 10 to, I would not call this a pleasant viewing experience. Don't get me wrong. Go out and see Oppenheimer. It's a well-made, well-crafted picture by Christopher Nolan, who again knocks it out of the ballpark. But I wouldn't call it a fun time at the movies, man. But it's not trying to be. Obviously, it wants you to think about this. It wants to be, like I said, like almost a mythological a mytholog or a mythical? Sorry, I think it's a mythical tragedy, and it succeeds in that. So once again, 10 out of 10 for Oppenheimer. This has been another edition of. I can't wait to see it again. This has been another edition of Wade Watches, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.